Hey everyone, welcome in to another daily editorial here on the KE Report. We're talking about three new discoveries, all coming out of Nevada King Gold, all within the last about 3 months, most of them carrying some high-grade gold over some long widths. I'm chatting right now with Collin Kettell, founder and CEO of Nevada King Gold, traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol NKG, and on the OTCQX under the symbol NKGFF. Now, Collin, take us through these three discoveries, first announced back just over a month ago on July 16th, the East Ridge Zone, then July 23rd, the South Quartzsite Ridge, and then August 19th, the most recent one, the Wild West Zone. All of these discoveries are coming from the Atlanta Gold Mine Project. Collin, walk us through a quick summary of these discoveries, please.
For sure. Corey, thanks for having me on. We've got three back-to-back discoveries here, starting with that East Ridge discovery. And providing just a tad bit of context will help your listeners if they're not quite familiar, which is the Atlanta Resource Zone, which has been in place since before we started drilling, has been the focus of much of our Phase 1 and Phase 2 drilling. And we believe that has been very important. We've had a lot of success. We found things that prior operators did not find, and we've pushed the boundaries of mineralization on each of those sides. What it's done is it's allowed our geologic team to figure out or start to figure out an incredibly complex system. And the word complexity might initially be scary to an investor, but complexity is what you want when you're looking for a big system. The complexity typically means a lot of fluid pathways and a lot of ways for gold mineralization to be deposited, and that's exactly what we think we have at Atlanta. So we've been looking forward towards our Phase 3 program, and the idea of Phase 3 is we're going to step out and take everything that we've learned from in and around the Atlanta Resource Zone and apply that to the district. The district at Atlanta is controlled by a volcano, a caldera, that was put there about 30 million years ago. And it's along the rim of this 6-kilometer wide caldera that the Atlanta Resource Zone exists. That caldera feature is what would have deposited the gold. And so we have a large district that we control where a lot more potential exists to find more mineralization. So what did we do? We went ahead and ran some very powerful geophysics tools over the last couple of years. And as an investor in companies in the past that show me these very colorful geophysical maps with red and blue and green, it oftentimes doesn't mean much to me, and it oftentimes doesn't seem to materialize into much. That is not the case at Atlanta. We've been very surprised, in fact, by just how helpful this CSAMT work has been. And it's helped us to lead to these three discoveries that we've put out just in the last month. So the first one is the East Ridge target. And the East Ridge target is up on a topographic high that is immediately adjacent to the pit. Because it's on a bit of topography, historical operators never bothered cutting the roads up there to go ahead and try to drill it, even though they knew that there was gold at surface. They just kind of assumed it was probably a superficial expression or surface expression of gold that was not deep-rooted. The CSAMT shows that it is deep-rooted. In fact, there's an intrusive plume that can be seen from depth leading right up and coinciding to the geochemical anomaly on surface. And so we went ahead and drilled it, and we hit intrusive rock, we hit mineralized rock. We hit about 22 meters of 1.3 grams. So nothing crazy, but it gave us a lot of confidence and enthusiasm about the CSAMT. Then we followed up just a couple weeks later, I should say a week later, with a discovery at the South Quartzsite Ridge target. This was a very exciting intercept. We hit 6.3 grams per ton gold over 55 meters. It was drilled from the southernmost point that we can reach from our patented private ground before we need to get permission from the Bureau of Land Management to then cut some new roads that go onto the main target area called the South Quartzsite Ridge. The hole was very enlightening and successful because it drilled through the quartzite. So this Quartzsite Ridge is about a 2.5-kilometer long target that's never been drilled. And the top of it is a thick slab of what's called eureka quartzite. And quartzite is not a very good host for gold because it's very hard for mineralization to seep into, but it can act as a really good cap. So if you want to think of like the roof of a house acting as a cap for smoke to pool under, same idea here is that quartzite cap could act as a really good way for mineralizing fluid to get stuck under. And so this hole, we drilled through the quartzite about 150 meters. And as soon as we broke out through the quartzite, we got into intrusive mineralized rock. And what's maybe most impressive when we saw the intercept is the full 55 meters, you cannot pull a high grade intercept out of it, meaning the gold is almost perfectly homogeneously distributed through those 55 meters. You might be able to pull out like 20 meters of 8 grams, but there's no very high grade area. It's just very nicely distributed. So what is the significance of this is we have a 2.5 kilometer long target area that's immediately adjacent to the resource zone. It's on trend with all of the primary faults that we know feed high-grade gold into the Atlanta resource zone. It happens to coincide with a major anticline. So the anticline is like that roof of the house analogy I just used. And it's all capped by quartzite, meaning it's been hidden. So if there's something out there that could be an elephant-sized target that was overlooked or not drilled by past operators, we would rank the South Quartzsite Ridge as number 1 in terms of where we're most excited about. And then the third one that I'll touch on is the Atlanta resource zone. We thought, and historic explorers thought, pinched out to the west. As you got past the West Atlanta Graben zone, there's a fault called the West Atlanta Fault number 2. And it seemed that immediately on the west side of the West Atlanta Fault number 2, the grade started to fall off. And based on how deep that the mineralization is, nobody followed up on it. We went ahead and drilled 8 holes out there. And the highlight hole that we hit is 42 meters of 4.7 grams per ton gold. And around that, we hit several intercepts. Almost all of the 8 holes had high-grade intervals exceeding a few meters, over a few grams per ton. And what does that mean? It means we've actually got a zone that's coming together that seems to have continuity and could potentially be adding a significant amount of ounces. Everything that we're finding in all 3 zones and across the Atlanta project is heavily oxidized. So we're not looking at funky and tough to recover mineralization. This is as simple and as good as it gets being oxide. And so now the plan is we're going to continue stepping out of these zones and try to make more discoveries.
So, Collin, how do you go about ranking these 3 discoveries then? We look at the East Ridge zone, that was lower grade mineralization and over a more narrow width, but still 23 meters, but that was pretty much at surface. South Quartzsite Ridge, that had the high grade and the longest width in the headline hole. That was about 150 meters downhole. This Wild West zone, that overall also had some high grade over a long width, but that was even deeper downhole. So what's the number 1 priority to go back to, even though you're going back to all of them? What has the best potential for size?
Potential for demonstrating something of an elephant at Atlanta, I believe, and I think our team would all be behind me, is the South Quartzsite Ridge target. In terms of immediate tangibility and where we see ounces already starting to accumulate that are connected to the resource zone is the Wild West zone. The East Ridge target certainly takes a backseat to those 2. However, if your listeners have a chance to look at that July 16th release, the East Ridge target intrusive plume that comes up and where we found the gold also shoots out to the east into a very large target called the Jumbo target, which has not been drilled. It's 3,000 meters north-south by about 500 meters east-west. And there's a large intrusive body that plumes up there. And we know from the surface that there's essentially overburden, volcanic ash or flow would be a good way to think about it, that's obscured what is potentially immediately beneath it. And so if you connect the East Ridge target to the Jumbo next to it, I would say we're very excited about all 3 areas.
So what is the next phase of drilling? When will it start? What insights can you give us on just how focused you will be on following up on these new discoveries, but then also testing some other new areas?
We're still in the midst of phase 2, but phase 2 drilling is going to come to an end here soon, and it's going to then turn into our phase 3 drill program. The phase 3 drill program, which we're going to be continuing to put out information on in the next few weeks, is going to be a primarily regional targeting program. And so these CSAMT anomalies that have led to the discoveries at the South Quartzsite Ridge and the Wild West Zone and the East Ridge and the Jumbo target have also shown us 8 other high priority targets that we have not had the chance to show to the market yet, but we're working on that, and we're going to be putting those out here shortly. So what we're waiting on in order to start the phase 3 program and begin drilling is all of our property is covered by a plan of operation. So aside from the pit area, which is on private ground, meaning we have unfettered access to do whatever we want there, the rest of it is BLM ground, and that BLM ground is covered by a plan of operation. However, in order to go ahead and drill these areas and put roads up onto the South Quartzsite Ridge, we do have to liaise with the BLM, and we have to ask for a modification to the plan. We're several months into the process of doing this modification, and depending on what the BLM decides as to whether this is a minor modification or something more significant, we could be receipted on that in the next several weeks. It could take a little bit longer, so as soon as we have certainty, we'll let everybody know. But what that means is 2024 to 2025 really has the potential to show the district scale size that Atlanta could provide for us. Meanwhile, we don't have a shortage of things to do. The Wild West target is still on patented ground, and we're continuing to step out there, and we'll see what we continue to find as we put more holes.
How aggressive will you step out at these targets? Simply because, as you've outlined in prior interviews too, it's been narrow step outs because you do need to focus on where this mineralization is running. Should we continue to expect that out of step out holes?
No, we're going to be doing significantly larger step outs at the Wild West zone. So we're looking at anywhere between 50 to 75 meters per step out. And that's not to say that in certain cases based on access or what we find, we won't go a bit tighter, but it's going to be pretty broad step outs there. On the regional basis, we have about 60 holes planned amongst those 10 or 11 target areas, and they're widely spaced. And the idea there is we need to drill some holes, see what we get back. Do we find gold? Do we find high-grade gold? Do we find some kind of a tracer element that gets us excited that we're close to gold? And then we'll go in with another pass on those specific areas, and we'll see area specific as to what makes sense.
Collin, let's talk about the share price trading then, because let's go back to the start of these discoveries, July 16th. The share price is up a little bit from that level, but overall, you've had 2 other discoveries here. One might think that the share price should be much higher, getting a bit more attention. What can you tell us about what you're hearing from shareholders?
Well, speaking from a more macro standpoint and just the junior market as a whole, it's been a very volume light market, and also up until very recently, there's been a significant sell-off that has spared very few stocks that are listed. And so we've been in a backdrop that has been tough. And so there are not very many sellers, but there are not very many buyers. And this junior sector is so susceptible to capital flows that ultimately having capital flows coming in would certainly benefit companies like Nevada King. That being said, I am confident that is going to come. We've got gold prices moving up above 2,500. The majors and mid-tiers, generally speaking, are making a lot of money, and their attitudes towards exploration is changing. Even if it's not very noticeable to most, they are starting to make equity investments. They're starting to option and joint venture in a significant way on exploration projects. And there is no jurisdiction in the world that is better to be in than Nevada if one can show multi-million ounce potential. And I believe that Nevada King is right on the cusp of doing that. And I therefore believe that Nevada King is extremely undervalued, which is why I've been continuing to put a lot of my resources of both time and money into it. And so it's a matter of continuing to put out the results, continuing to show the market the results, and the stubbornness of the share price will resolve itself in time.
Yeah, very interesting. Some nice discoveries here and continuing to grow this project broadly through drilling in Nevada. Let's talk about capital management then. You have a lot of plans here to continue the phase 2 program and then move into this phase 3 program. How much money is the company sitting on? What do you think that budget's going to be for phase 3?
We're working on the final budget for phase 3 now. We're probably going to spend somewhere in the range of 15 million Canadian over the next 12 to 16 months. And Nevada King has had a very good track record of raising capital over the past few years. It's partially been because I've been in a fortunate position to be able to act as the lead order on those financings, along with a couple other significant shareholders. And as such, while financings in the junior space are typically concerning for other shareholders, that is, they're done at discounts and done with warrants, and they don't leave the sense that retail shareholders who are not participating in them are on a level playing field at all times. We've bucked the trend, and we've done all of our past three financings at a premium to market or at the market prices, so no discounts. We have not done any warrants. And Nevada King also has a unique share structure with myself at 18%. I have paid about the amount that my shares are worth in terms of acquiring them. So this is not a situation of a bunch of free shares. And we also have insiders and management at another 18%. All that to being said, we have less than $5 million at the moment, but myself and the other significant shareholders are there willing and ready to lead the next financing, and we're just deciding on when and how we want to do that. We don't have any imminent rush to be doing one.
Okay. One final news event to talk about. Very beginning of August, you announced the completion of the NV King Goldlands spin-out. So the company has spun out other projects within that portfolio outside of the Atlanta gold mine projects into NV Goldlands. Let's talk about that strategy. It's not trading yet, but what was the idea behind that spin out, and when do you think it could go public?
We don't have a timeline laid out to go public. It's going to be market dependent, and so we'd be looking for an appropriate time where the junior resource sector does maybe have some capital flows and interest coming in so that the shareholders can benefit from whatever capital that we would raise through that event being done at a price where it unlocks value. So I don't have any specific comments on when it would get public. That being said, the rationale for it is quite simple in that we feel that Atlanta is getting to the point where it is going to start attracting some serious companies. And those companies are not necessarily interested in the more grassroots projects that made up the rest of the portfolio, nor are the shareholders of Nevada King interested in giving those grassroots projects away to somebody who's potentially interested in acquiring Atlanta, which would certainly be the lion's share of the value that they would be paying for. So we thought it was a very strategic move at this time to go ahead and spin the other assets out and therefore leave Nevada King as a single asset focused company that's very easy to understand, easy to invest. If there is a strategic shareholder out there, it just makes it so much cleaner for them to understand what it is they're buying and what it is that they could potentially be angling for. So we think it was a very good move, and at some point in the future, NV King Goldlands will likely seek a public listing. We just don't know exactly when yet.
Okay. Collin, thank you for this update. A lot for us to discuss. I will post a link to the Nevada King Gold website in the show notes so you all can read over all the recent news releases. Please send me any questions that you have for Collin, and I will get those addressed in future interviews. Collin, thanks again for the update here, and please, let's get you back on the show on the back of some more drill results.
Corey, thanks as always. It's been great. Really